was that soul searching like? Because you took a little time off and think like how many mushrooms did you take? No, I'm just kidding.
So I would say just doing this in production at scale is like the hard part. It's an execution problem. Extremely good execution is so hard when you're dealing with data at that scale.
Tesla last year removed radar from the sensor suite and now just announced that it's going to remove ultrasonic sensors, relying solely on vision, so camera only.
And I think Elon is really good at simplify. Best part is no part. And he always tries to throw away things that are not essential because he understands the entropy in organizations and an approach.
What do you think about the LIDAR as a crutch debate?
Like they pre-map all the environments and they need to refresh the map. And they have a perfect centimeter level accuracy map of everywhere they're going to drive. It's crazy. When we're talking about autonomy actually changing the world, we're talking about a deployment on a global scale of autonomous systems for transportation. And if you need to maintain a centimeter accurate map for Earth or like for many cities and keep them updated, it's a huge dependency that you're taking on. Huge dependency. It's a massive, massive dependency. And now you need to ask yourself, do you really need it? And humans don't need it. It's a crutch. It's a distraction. It costs entropy. He hates meetings. He keeps telling people to skip meetings if they're not useful. He basically runs the world's biggest startups, I would say. Tesla, SpaceX are the world's biggest startups. Tesla actually is multiple startups. I think it's better to look at it that way. If you have a big person who's also really smart and has a big hammer, things move quickly. I'm happy to potentially at some point come back for Act 2. Like if you think transportation is a large market, try physical labor. It's like insane. Basically, this robot currently thinks it's a car. If you were to go with the goal of like, okay, let's build 1 million human robots and you're not Tesla, that's a lot to ask. If you're Tesla, it's actually like, it's not that crazy.
What do you think is the timeline to solve the problem of autonomous driving?
In this video, ex-Tesla AI director Andrej Karpathy, who ran Tesla's autopilot team for half a decade, speaks with Lex Fridman, explaining why Tesla's approach to autonomy is the right one, why those using LIDAR and HD mapping are doomed, why no one can compete with Tesla's humanoid robot, why Elon Musk is a great leader, and loads of other incredibly juicy insights. If you own Tesla stock, this is a very important video. Speaking of videos, I posted another 2 exclusive videos to Patreon this morning. If you're not a member, you really are missing out. I told you guys, I'm taking this motherfucker over, and it's only a matter of time until I get you, so put yourself out of the misery and join now with the card in the corner or the link in the pinned comment.
From the vision perspective, what are the toughest parts of the vision problem of driving?
Well, basically, the sensor is extremely powerful, but you still need to process that information. And so going from brightnesses of these pixel values to, hey, here's the 3-dimensional world is extremely hard. And that's what the neural networks are fundamentally doing. And so the difficulty really is in just doing an extremely good job of engineering the entire pipeline, the entire data engine, having the capacity to train these neural nets, having the ability to evaluate the system and iterate on it. So I would say just doing this in production at scale is like the hard part. It's an execution problem.
Can you describe the data engine?
You have a data set that you think is good. You train your neural net, you deploy it, and then you observe how well it's performing. And you're trying to always increase the quality of your data set. So you're trying to catch scenarios basically that are basically rare. And it is in these scenarios that the neural nets will typically struggle in because they weren't told what to do in those rare cases in the dataset. But now you can close the loop because if you can now collect all those at scale, you can then feed them back into the reconstruction process I described and reconstruct the truth in those cases and add it to the dataset. And so the whole thing ends up being like a staircase of improvement of perfecting your training set. And you have to go through deployments so that you can mine the parts that are not yet represented well in the dataset. So your dataset is basically imperfect. It needs to be diverse. It has pockets that are missing, and you need to pad out the pockets. You can sort of think of it that way. It really just comes down to extremely good execution from an engineering team who knows what they're doing. They understand intuitively the philosophical insights underlying the data engine and the process by which the system improves, and how to, again, like delegate the strategy of the data collection and how that works. And then just making sure it's all extremely well executed. And that's where most of the work is not even the philosophizing or the research or the ideas of it. It's just extremely good execution. It's so hard when you're dealing with data at that scale.
So loads of very important points regarding the approach to autonomy, the data engine, how critically important this is. But I just wanted to hone in on one thing that Andrej said there. Extremely good execution is just so hard when you're dealing with data at that scale. Not only is this important and true, but this one comment exposes how far behind literally everyone else is in attempting to develop their own autonomous software. No other company is even close to the same scale that Tesla's at in terms of the data collection. Not even close. They're multiple orders of magnitude away. Not only do companies attempting to catch up to Tesla in terms of autonomy, which ain't fucking happening, spoiler alert, but in order for them to do so, they would somehow first need to build a mountain of data and then execute near flawlessly on top of that. But if you don't have the mountain of data first, you've got nothing to execute against in the first place. That's where literally everyone other than Tesla is now. They still need to build a mountain of data first via fleet learning, not happening, and then execute brilliantly against that. You guys understand how far away from Tesla the so-called competition really is on this extremely difficult challenge? Continue to keep that in mind as Andrej shares some additional thoughts.
Elon also, he always wanted to drive the system himself. He drives a lot, and I want to say almost daily. So he also sees this as a source of truth. You driving the system, and it performing.
Tesla last year removed radar from the sensor suite, and now just announced that it's going to remove ultrasonic sensors, relying solely on vision, so camera only. Does that make the perception problem harder or easier?
You guys may recall at the time Tesla announced the removal of radar from their hardware stack. I described this as a big swinging dick moment from Tesla. They're so confident in their vision-only approach that they can get rid of this now unnecessary, in fact counterproductive, sensor. Of course, the hate-stream media and the morons in the finance community painted this as Tesla's trying to save money at the risk of people's safety. No radar, dangerous cars, they're going to crash. F*** you, Elon Musk, I hate you. Because they didn't get it. I also, at the time, said, this won't be the last time Tesla removes sensors. In fact, it will occur again in the future. It'll be another very bullish, big swinging dick moment. And of course, everybody's going to paint it very negatively. Next minute, and I mean about a year later, we learned that Tesla's removing ultrasonic sensors, relying on literally pure vision, just cameras. The only reason Tesla's doing this is because they're so confident about their vision-only approach. They no longer need to rely on any backup sensors. Tesla is literally the only company I'm aware of, at least at any reasonable scale, who's pursuing a vision-only approach. Everyone else thinks they need to rely on radar, LIDAR, and high-definition pre-mapping plus geofencing. This is why everyone other than Tesla is doomed. They don't have generalized, scalable approaches. So keep this in mind. As I've said, and I will repeat myself, the deletion of sensors is an extremely bullish signal. It shows incredible, growing confidence in a vision-only approach.
Basically, you would think that these sensors are an asset to you.
Yeah.
But if you fully consider the entire product in its entirety, these sensors are actually potentially a liability because these sensors aren't free. They don't just appear on your car. Suddenly you need to have an entire supply chain. You have people procuring it. There can be problems with them. They may need replacement. They are part of the manufacturing process. They can hold back the line in production. You need to source them. You need to maintain them. You have to have teams that write the firmware, all of it. And then you also have to incorporate them, fuse them into the system in some way. And so it actually bloats a lot of it. And I think Elon is really good at simplify. Best part is no part. Mm-hmm. And he always tries to throw away things that are not essential because he understands the entropy in organizations and an approach. And I think in this case, the cost is high and you're not potentially seeing it if you're just a computer vision engineer. And I'm just trying to improve my network and, is it more useful or less useful? How useful is it? And the thing is, if once you consider the full cost of a sensor, it actually is potentially a liability, and you need to be really sure that it's giving you extremely useful information. In this case, we looked at using it or not using it, and the delta was not massive, and so it's not useful.
Is it also bloat in the data engine, like having more sensors?
100%.
Is a distraction?
And these sensors, they can change over time. For example, you can have one type of, say, radar, you can have other type of radar, they change over time. Now suddenly you need to worry about it. Now suddenly you have a column in your SQLite telling you, what sensor type was it? And they all have different distributions. And then they contribute noise and entropy into everything, and they bloat stuff. And also organizationally, it's been really fascinating to me that it can be very distracting. If all you want to get to work is vision, all the resources are on it, and you're building out a data engine, and you're actually making forward progress because that is the sensor with the most bandwidth, the most constraints in the world, and you're investing fully into that, and you can make that extremely good. If you have only a finite amount of sort of spend of focus across different facets of the system.
So here's a little bit of a tip in terms of assessing the progress of companies other than Tesla attempting to develop their own fully autonomous software. These are a few milestones along the path of progress. They're still very early on, but at some point in the future, a good sign will be when they realize, you know what, that LIDAR is kind of confusing our signals with the vision from the cameras, and we've realized we need to get rid of LIDAR. Further along, we've just realized that radar is also giving noise and causing causing less accurate predictions. Let's remove that because it's unnecessary. It's not only unnecessary, but it's actually counterproductive. Then the next step, maybe these will be in a different sequence, but you guys get the point. Oh, we just realized that if we need to HD map everything before we actually use it and continue to update those maps, that's not a scalable solution. We need a more generalized approach. Let's get rid of the HD mapping. And then eventually they announced they're shutting down their company because they realized they never catch up to Tesla. Sorry, not sorry. The fact that no other companies have yet even realized they need to start deleting sensors, they haven't even got that far along to realize it's necessary, just shows how far behind they are. So pay attention. The sooner other companies get to these points, the better for them, and it will just be an indication of how far behind Tesla they really are.
What do you think about the LIDAR as a crutch debate? The battle between point clouds and pixels.
Yeah, I think this debate is always like slightly confusing to me because it seems like the actual debate should be about like, do you have the fleet or not? That's like the really important thing about whether you can achieve a really good functioning of an AI system at this scale.
So according to this dickhead who doesn't know anything about AI, neural networks, computer vision, he's not an expert, he's got no experience, especially not in the real world. Apparently, you kind of need a fleet to be successful in these type of projects. Self-driving vehicles, useful humanoid robots, these kind of things. And if you don't have a fleet, you're basically fucked, which would seem to indicate that Tesla isn't fucked and everyone else is fucked. But of course, he doesn't know anything about anything. He's not credible. He's not an expert. He doesn't have experience. Therefore, you should definitely disregard everything Andrej says, which is basically what every Wall Street stock analyst is doing, what all the so-called experts in the finance media are doing, and many of the folks currently investing in self-driving startups are also doing. Good luck with that.
So data collection systems.
Yeah, do you have a fleet or not is significantly more important whether you have LIDAR or not. It's just another sensor. And yeah, I think similar to the radar discussion, basically, I don't think it basically doesn't offer extra information. It's extremely costly. It has all kinds of problems. You have to worry about it. You have to calibrate it, etc. It creates bloat and entropy. You have to be really sure that you need this sensor. In this case, I basically don't think you need it. And I think, honestly, I will make a stronger statement. I think the others, some of the other companies that are using it are probably going to drop it.
You know, I'll take it a step further. They're either going to drop LIDAR or go bankrupt. Maybe both, or maybe just the latter. But all roads lead to LIDAR being completely unnecessary, and not only unnecessary, but counterproductive. Yet, if you're not far enough along, and you're an idiot, you may not yet recognize this.
Vision is necessary in the sense that the world is designed for human visual consumption, so you need vision. And then also it is sufficient because it has all the information that you need for driving, and humans obviously use vision to drive. So it's both necessary and sufficient. So you want to focus resources, and you have to be really sure if you're going to bring in other sensors. You could add sensors to infinity. At some point, you need to draw the line. And I think in this case, you have to really consider the full cost of any one sensor that you're adopting, and do you really need it? And I think the answer in this case is no.
So what do you think about the idea that the other companies are forming high-resolution maps and constraining heavily the geographic regions in which they operate? Is that approach not, in your view, not going to scale over time to the entirety of the United States?
I think
it'll take too
long. As you mentioned, like they pre-map all the environments and they need to refresh the map, and they have a perfect centimeter level accuracy map of everywhere they're going to drive. It's crazy. How are you going to, when we're talking about autonomy actually changing the world, we're talking about a deployment on a global scale of autonomous systems for transportation. And if you need to maintain a centimeter accurate map for Earth or like for many cities and keep them updated, it's a huge dependency that you're taking on. Huge dependency. It's a massive, massive dependency. And now you need to ask yourself, do you really need it? And humans don't need it.
Just a couple of things. We literally heard Andrej Karpathy here describe HD pre-mapping as crazy. I mean, not suboptimal, not necessarily an okay, no, crazy. And the guy literally laughed, lost his fucking composure, laughed out loud at the absurdity. Couldn't even control himself. But again, he doesn't know anything about anything, so who cares what he thinks, right?
So it's very useful to have a low-level map of like, okay, the connectivity of your road. You know that there's a fork coming up. When you drive an environment, you sort of have that high-level understanding. It's like a small Google map, and Tesla uses Google Map, like similar kind of resolution information in its system, but it will not pre-map environments to centimeter-level accuracy. It's a crutch. It's a distraction. It costs entropy. And it diffuses the team, it dilutes the team, and you're not focusing on what's actually necessary, which is the computer vision problem. I think Elon is a very efficient warrior in the fight against entropy in organizations. He hates meetings. He keeps telling people to skip meetings if they're not useful. Yeah. He basically runs the world's biggest startups I would say. Tesla, SpaceX are the world's biggest startups. Tesla actually is multiple startups. I think it's better to look at it that way.
True, important, and not widely understood. Tesla still, despite its incredible scale, has a DNA, the culture of a startup. Extremely lean and resourceful, very efficient, no waste, a sense of continual urgency. Do whatever it takes, just get shit done. The one metric that matters. What did you get done this week? Most organizations, as they grow, become bloated, inefficient, less resourceful, more wasteful, and eventually fall apart. Somehow, despite its incredible scale, Tesla maintains that startup culture. As Andrej points out, Tesla really is like a bunch of independent startups. Most people are not appreciating this, but they will as it rolls into Tesla's financials as they continue to scale. People see Tesla's operating expenses barely moving despite their revenue growing enormously. Go, must be fraud. No other company's ever done this ever. Must be fraud, right?
I do think he needs someone in a powerful position with a big hammer like Elon, who's like the cheerleader for that idea and ruthlessly pursues it. If no one has a big enough hammer, everything turns into committees, democracy within the company, process, talking to stakeholders, decision-making, just everything just crumbles.
Yeah.
If you have a big person who is also really smart and has a big hammer, things move quickly.
This is an excellent point. What Andrej means by this, a big person with a hammer, is somebody who has the final say and is willing to wield the hammer. Elon Musk's philosophy is get shit done, motherfuckers. And Elon's willing to turn on a dime, reverse direction, change course, make a decision and move on with things. Whereas a company like Volkswagen, for example, would have a decision to make and then plan a pre-meeting to discuss what will be discussed at the meeting, and then invite 128 different senior executives over 12 days to discuss, deliberate, debate, and then maybe make a decision, pending the approval of 20,000 other stakeholders. Meanwhile, in the time it takes VW to make one fucking decision, Tesla's released 24 new products. Slight exaggeration, but you get the point. Bureaucracy, red tape, too many people with decision-making power, and no one individual with a gigantic fucking hammer is how companies squander their opportunities and get disrupted by companies like Tesla.
I wouldn't say that setting impossible goals exactly is a good idea, but I think setting very ambitious goals is a good idea. I think there's what I call sublinear scaling of difficulty, which means that 10x problems are not 10x hard. Usually 10x harder problem is like 2 or 3x harder to execute on.
This is another incredibly important point and one that is not well understood. This applies to so many things in life. The effort to reward equation is non-linear. I could give a million different examples of this. Think about professional sports. An athlete who performs just a few percent better, gains more meters, hits 1% more home runs. Pick your example. That tiny difference in performance can create an outsized impact and reap outsized rewards. I mean, here's a good example. You work just 10 times harder, smarter, more efficient, and longer than your colleagues, you will smoke everyone in your industry. Just how it works. You don't need to work 10 times harder or smarter to make 10 times the income. Maybe you only need to work twice as hard or twice as smart. I'm sure many people watching would know of people who they believe are making an absolutely absurd income. They don't seem to be working that much harder than you or that much longer, yet they're making 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 50 times, 100 times as much. Why would that be? As I said, there is a non-linear relationship between effort, difficulty of the task, and reward. You may have to work twice as hard to get 10 times the results, or in this case, 2 to 3 times as much effort to get a 10x return. And that's the point. It's worth it.
Because if you want to actually if you want to improve a system by 10%, it costs some amount of work. And if you want to 10x improve the system, it doesn't cost, 100x amount of the work. And it's because you fundamentally change the approach. And if you start with that constraint, then some approaches are obviously dumb and not going to work. And it forces you to reevaluate. And I think it's a very interesting way of approaching problem solving.
What do you think is the timeline to solve the problem of autonomous driving?
Yeah, I think the tough thing with timelines of self-driving, obviously, is that no one has created self-driving.
Yeah.
So it's not like, what do you think is a timeline to build this bridge? Well, we've built a million bridges before. Here's how long that takes. No one has built autonomy. It's not obvious. Some parts turned out to be much easier than others. So it's really hard to forecast. You do your best based on trend lines and so on, and based on intuition. But that's why fundamentally it's just really hard to forecast it. And I think, for example, at least what I've seen in roughly 5 years at Tesla, when I joined, it barely kept lane. on the highway. I think going up from Palo Alto to SF was like 3 or 4 interventions. Anytime the road would do anything geometrically or turn too much, it would just like not work. And so going from that to like a pretty competent system in 5 years and seeing what happens also under the hood and what the scale at which the team is operating now with respect to data and compute and everything else is just massive progress.
Lots of great points here, in particular how difficult it is to predict the timing on something that's never been done before. Of course, if you're a self-hating basement-dwelling adult virgin who also happens to be short Tesla stock, predicting things that have never been done before is tantamount to fraud if your prediction isn't perfectly accurate in terms of the timeline. The only possible explanation is fraud and intentional deception, not the incredible difficulty of predicting what has never been done before. But to Andrej's second point here, in the 5 years that he was at Tesla, their self-driving technology went from pretty damn useless/dangerous to incredibly competent. Still not perfect, but the progress in just that span of time really is incredible. And for what it's worth, I'm still sticking by my longer term prediction. I believe the first paid fare in a Tesla robotaxi will occur somewhere on planet Earth, most likely in 2024. Probably the second half of the year. Of course, it's impossible to know whether or not this prediction will age well, but it's the best I've got to go on, and that's where a combination of intuition and my brain are pointing.
What was that soul searching like? Because you took a little time off and think like, what? How many mushrooms did you take? No, I'm just kidding.
No comment.
Well, it was hard because obviously I love the company a lot, and I love Elon, I love Tesla. So it was hard to leave. I love the team basically. But yeah, I think I would be potentially like interested in revisiting it. Maybe coming back at some point, working in Optimus, working in AGI at Tesla. I think Tesla is going to do incredible things. It's basically like, it's a massive, large-scale robotics kind of company with a ton of in-house talent for doing really incredible things. Yeah. And I think humanoid robots are going to be amazing. I think autonomous transportation is going to be amazing. All this is happening at Tesla. So I think it's just a really amazing organization. So being part of it and helping it along, I think was basically I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, it was basically difficult for those reasons because I love the company. But, I'm happy to potentially at some point come back for Act 2.
He'll be back, and just in case anyone's wondering, direct quote from Elon Musk just a moment ago, Andrej will always be welcome at Tesla.
You mentioned humanoid robots, so what do you think about Optimus, about Tesla Bot? Do you think we'll have robots in the factory and in the home in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
Yeah, I think it's a very hard project. I think it's going to take a while. But who else is going to build humanoid robots at scale?
That's a great question, Mr. Karpathy. Who else is going to build humanoid robots at scale? I'm just kidding. I already know the answer. No one.
Yeah. And I think it is a very good form factor to go after because, like I mentioned, the world is designed for humanoid form factor. These things would be able to operate our machines. They would be able to sit down in chairs, potentially even drive cars. Basically, the world is designed for humans. That's the form factor you want to invest into and make work over time. I think there's another school of thought, which is, okay, pick a problem and design a robot to it. But actually designing a robot and getting a whole data engine and everything behind it to work is actually an incredibly hard problem. So it makes sense to go after general interfaces that, they are not perfect for any one given task, but they actually have the generality of just with a prompt with English able to do something across. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to go after a general interface in the physical world. And I think it's a very difficult project. I think it's going to take time. But I see no other company that can execute on that vision.
Well, what do you know? It turns out that I'm not the only one who thinks that no other company will actually ever be building humanoid robots at scale. Of course, what would I know? What would Andrej know? Nothing.
I think it's going to be amazing. Like if you think transportation is a large market, try physical labor. It's like insane.
It sure fucking is insane.
Well, but it's not just physical labor. To me, the thing that's also exciting is the social robotics. So the relationship we'll have on different levels with those robots.
Yeah.
That's why I was really excited to see Optimus. Like people have criticized me for the excitement, but I've worked with a lot of research labs that do humanoid legged robots, Boston Dynamics, Unitree, there's a lot of companies that do legged robots. That's the elegance of the movement is a tiny, tiny part of the big picture. So integrating the two big exciting things to me about Tesla doing humanoid or any legged robots, clearly integrating it into the data engine. Mm-hmm. So the data engine aspect, so the actual intelligence for the perception and the control and the planning and all that kind of stuff, integrating into this the fleet that you mentioned, right? And then speaking of fleet, the second thing is the mass manufacture, just knowing culturally driving towards a simple robot that's cheap to produce at scale.
Yeah.
And doing that well, having experience to do that well, that changes everything. That's why that's a very different culture and style than Boston Dynamics, who, by the way, those robots are just the way they move. It's like it'll be a very long time before Tesla can achieve the smoothness of movement. But that's not what it's about. It's about the entirety of the system, like we talked about, the data engine and the fleet. And that's super exciting. Even the initial sort of models, but that too was really surprising. That in a few months you can get a prototype.
Yep. And the reason that happened very quickly is, as you alluded to, there's a ton of copy paste from what's happening on the autopilot.
Yes.
A lot. The amount of expertise that came out of the woodworks at Tesla for building the human robot was incredible to see. Basically, Elon said at one point, we're doing this. And then next day, basically, all these CAD models started to appear. And people talking about the supply chain and manufacturing.
Yeah.
And people showed up with screwdrivers and everything the other day and started to put together the body. And I was like, whoa, all these people exist at Tesla. And fundamentally, building a car is actually not that different from building a robot. The same, and that is true, not just for the hardware pieces. And also, let's not forget hardware, not just for a demo, but manufacturing of that hardware at scale is a whole different thing. But for software as well, basically this robot currently thinks it's a car.
It's going to have a midlife crisis at some point.
It thinks it's a car. Some of the earlier demos, actually, we were talking about potentially doing them outside in the parking lot because that's where all of the computer vision was working out of the box.
That's funny.
Instead of inside. But all the operating system, everything just copy pastes. Computer vision mostly copy pastes. I mean, you have to retrain the neural nets, but the approach and everything and data engine and offline trackers and the way we go about the occupancy tracker and so on, everything copy pastes.
So the hilarious part of this exchange, Lex actually gets it. He's worked with a ton of robotics companies. He identifies and notices. He realizes what Tesla is doing is unique. Sure, the movement, that's cool, whatever. But it's really about the brain. Andre goes on to point out there's a lot of stuff you can copy paste from autopilot directly into the Tesla humanoid robot, which unfortunately for all the so-called AI experts who claim this was not going to happen, an unfortunate case of hubris outweighing intellect, in the span of a year, Tesla went from, hey, we're going to make a humanoid robot to, hey, we just copy-pasted autopilot into a humanoid robot, and it's actually pretty damn good already.
You just need to retrain the neural nets. And then the planning control, of course, has to change quite a bit. But there's a ton of copy-paste from what's happening at Tesla. And so if you were to go with the goal of okay, let's build 1 million humanoid robots, and you're not Tesla, that's a lot to ask. If you're Tesla, it's actually it's not that crazy.
So I'm pretty sure what he just said was, if you're not Tesla and you even think about making a humanoid robot, don't even fucking bother. It's not going to work. There's literally no point.
I think it's going to take a long time, but the way you want to structure the development is you need to say, okay, it's going to take a long time. How can I set up the product development roadmap so that I'm making revenue along the way? I'm not setting myself up for a 0-1 loss function where it doesn't work until it works. You don't want to be in that position. You want to make it useful almost immediately, and then you want to slowly deploy it and
at scale,
generalize
hopefully.
it at scale. And you want to set up your data engine, your improvement loops, the telemetry, the evaluation, the harness, and everything. And you want to improve the product over time incrementally, and you're making revenue along the way. That's extremely important because otherwise you cannot build these large undertakings just don't make sense economically. And also from the point of view of the team working on it, they need the dopamine along the way. They're not just going to make a promise about this being useful. This is going to change the world in 10 years when it works. This is not where you want to be. You want to be in a place like I think Autopilot is today, where it's offering increased safety and convenience of driving today. People pay for it, people like it, people purchase it. And then you also have the greater mission that you're working towards.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. This is Tesla's strategy. With their autonomous software, with the humanoid robot, create a useful product or service ASAP. It's not perfect, but something useful that people will experience, enjoy, and be willing to pay for, and then expand capabilities from there. Tesla will initially use the humanoid robots, the Optimus bot, in their own factories to do really basic tasks. Once they've got factory work down pat, some really basic move this object from here to there, no major issues, they'll then begin selling these bots to other companies who need them in similar situations. That will then create a larger fleet for more fleet learning that'll improve the capabilities. Next minute, these things are doing more boring, dangerous and repetitive tasks. Next minute, the capabilities go beyond commercial use in business applications to home use and on and on and on and on, and eventually to helping the Tesla Q virgins finally get laid. Oh, the irony. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Brilliant insights. Go check out the full podcast, linked in the description. Lex and Andre talking all sorts of stuff, not just Tesla. And keep in mind, Andre is one of the world experts in terms of AI, in particular computer vision. His statements really carry weight. And the too long didn't watch, pretty simple. Tesla's going to solve autonomy. Don't know when, but they will be first, and everyone else is going up blind alleys. Get it? Blind alleys, because LIDAR, that was bad. Whatever. Who else is going to build a humanoid robot at scale? Spoiler alert! No one. So I think if we extract the implications from those statements, Tesla's won autonomy, they've won humanoid robots, they've won AGI, and that's definitely not why I'm still buying Tesla stock with literally every spare cent. Speaking of spare cents, if you'd like to contribute a few of your own and unlock over 190 exclusive videos and counting, including, as I mentioned in the intro, 2 exclusive videos I posted just today on Patreon, you can join with the card in the corner or the link in the pinned comment. Just in case you've already forgotten, I really do intend on taking Patreon the f*** over. Love ya.